I've got 9 o'clock.
I have 9 o'clock too.
Good morning. Convene this morning for 9 a.m. Entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I move to go into executive session.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Call meeting to order. Please rise for the invocation and pledge of allegiance.
Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning with thankful hearts for your love and your mercy, and we ask for your wisdom and guidance in all that we do. We need your wisdom to use the knowledge that we have to do what is best for all citizens of this great county. Protect our troops who continue to fight for our freedom, and God bless America. Amen.
Amen. Supervisor Moss, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance to the flag
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the July 1st, 2013 meeting.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
and second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Committee or legislative reports? Supervisor Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, board members, I attended our Quad State meeting, and we're transferring our Secretary-Treasurer position from Kern County to Imperial County. We approved a budget of $139,000. We discussed the recent activity with Fish and Wildlife Service. Part of it's here today with on the agenda. Also, I sent our Executive Director to go over the Desert Landscape Conservation Cooperative Steering Committee. So far, only 2 counties have shown an interest and no state organizations, so we will just continue to monitor. Quad State will be reviewing our membership fees for the upcoming year to correct any deficiencies or just to make sure that everybody's being billed in an appropriate manner. I also attended the Arizona-Mexico Commission plenary session in Phoenix. Our trade with Mexico is about $6.3 billion of export, which is over 30% to Arizona in their total merchandise. In the Mexico, visitors spend about $7 million a day in Arizona. We looked at regionalization versus globalization. Mexico has outperformed the U.S. in the last 5 years. Since 1992, Arizona was the first state to embrace NAFTA. There's a $500 billion in trade a year. There's 110,000 jobs in Arizona that depend on Mexico. Our imports from Mexico contain 40% U.S.-made products as compared to China, which is only 4%. So we're shipping products down. It's got a partnership. They have one of the fastest growing middle classes, and that middle class is looking to buy American products, so it's a market that we can hopefully make some money off of. Just to give you an idea, Mexico is the 6th largest supplier in aerospace. They're a leader in flat screens. Probably almost every flat screen that's made comes out of Mexico. They're the main supplier for our medical devices, the 8th producer of automobiles, and 11% of light vehicles are built in Mexico. Mexico has 12 free trade agreements with 44 countries, encompassing 1.2 billion people. Mexico is freeing up their country with their telecommunications. They're going to take away the stranglehold that one corporation has had on their television and their other communication that is available in Mexico. They're working on allowing American citizens or foreigners to own land for commercial buildings down there. One of the things that we came up with that was discussed is why things are moving from China to Mexico now. There are higher energy costs in China. The labor rates in China have gone up. The threats to the supply chain are breaking up. We also have the expansion of the Panama Canal, which is going to change the way things go, which could affect Arizona. The ports of entry have all been upgraded from Texas to Boston, Florida. All those are going up, so things will be moving. The congestion at the Long Beach and Los Angeles harbors are tremendous delays, and the delays at our port of entries that we have here too. They have built, I can't show the number right now, new harbors in Mexico to handle more foreign freight. So we could be losing a share of that coming in. In Phoenix, we have a lack of international flights out of Phoenix and Tucson. To give you a comparison, we have about 1.9 foreigners coming in on the international flights, where Vegas has 2.9 million people coming in. They've been building superhighways in Mexico. Utah, Nevada, and California are actively going after trade with Mexico right now. Last year alone, $19.1 billion in incentives was given by Texas. Texas has 29 points of entry. Two of the big things, aerospace is big down there. They do a lot in the aerospace industry for building things. The Aerobus is pretty much all their electronics are done down in Mexico now. One of the big points that was brought up, and it's something that I've talked about in the past, but is the Vegas to Phoenix highway they want to put in. And that's being pushed basically by Tucson and the Mexican government. I still think that we ought to look at see if we can get the government to help us with doing a toll road out of the Yuma area all the way up to the Kingman area. We have the land available, which is federal land, which it wouldn't be as much as what Phoenix wants, but that's going to open up Phoenix and leave us out of the loop, I think. That would run the whole length of our county, plus pick up Yuma and La Paz counties. The traffic would be quicker, but the way things are going, Mexico is on a real push to make a lot more money now. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman and board members.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. Any other committee reports? Legislative report? Just briefly, the state legislature is adjourned. I'm sure many of us are familiar with what occurred, and with great intrepidation, we've received that news of the HERF funds being transferred again from Mohave County and the other counties to the DPS. And so Arizona still is leaning on the counties for help through this economic situation. So briefly, my report. Report from the executive administrator.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. There's been some interest, both from the public and from the Board of Supervisors, to learn more about the activities of our Economic Development Department. So for today and for my county administrator's report, I've requested that Bennett Bradley, our Economic Development Director, come up and provide us with a short presentation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bradley.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Watson, Supervisor Moss, Brotherton, Angius, and Johnson. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share this update with you on the Economic Development Department. I'd like to use this time to not only go over programs that we offer, but to also visit some of the changes we've made and highlight a few past, very past and present projects that we're working on. Our department is located at 3250 East Keno Avenue on the second floor in Kingman. We have a very professional setting with conference room facilities to conduct professional meetings. Some of the functional responsibilities that our office or our department oversee is site selection assistance, relocation cost-benefit analysis, coordination of state and local assistance, fiscal economic impact calculations, custom proposals, custom research, financial contacts, building information, access to regulatory authorities, employee recruitment assistance, and labor market analysis. We also maintain some programs within our department. Our website, the Mohave County Economic Development website, has a vast array of information that we manage and update within our department. All these changes could be made within our department and at no additional cost, so we don't have to sub anything out. The in-plan model is a model that calculates economic and fiscal impacts. We try to get this model updated every 2 years so it's current. the Mohave County Economic Development Business Retention and Expansion Program, the B3 tool. It's a comprehensive web-based software where we do surveys of companies. Those surveys are then imported into a report, and we're able to gather data based on those findings. The Mohave County Economic Development Insight Property Search Tool. This is an online tool, which is it's a property search tool, which we pull properties straight from the MLS, the local board. So properties are updated immediately, and we have a real knowledge of the inventory that's out there for businesses to be able to look and see what's available. The data center, it's an online repository for economic development information and shared resources. We update this yearly. The Mohave Datacom software is some new software which enables us to run site comparisons between our county and other various counties. We have to purchase those other counties that we compare, and currently we're able to compare Mohave County to San Bernardino, Riverside, Orange, and Los Angeles counties. At this time, I'd like to go over some accomplishments which have greatly improved our ability to go after businesses within our targeted industries. 2011, our department was awarded a $50,000 grant from the newly established Arizona Commerce Authority. With a portion of these funds, our department was able to work with our regional partners and ESI Corporation to put together a 2011 targeted industry report. The study was completed with the goal of fully promoting regionalism in Mohave County. It was a collaboration of many local organizations, which included the Fort Mohave, Wallapai Indian tribes, as well as the cities of Bullhead, Lake Havasu, and Kingman. Upon completion of this report, the appropriate regional targeted industries in Lake Havasu City, Bullhead, Kingman, and the unincorporated areas came through. The report concluded that the targeted industries in Mohave County were arts and entertainment, which is tourism, healthcare, manufacturing, transportation, logistics, and energy. With the combination of the Mohave County Economic Development Funds and the grant funds, we were able to also work with Atlas Advertising to develop the new website, branding, and marketing campaign. One of the first steps we took in that process was to develop our website. This is what our website looked like in 2010. And this is what our website looks like currently. Once we also had those targeted industries, we incorporated that into our website. And so here's manufacturing, transportation, distribution and logistics, arts and entertainment or tourism, energy, and healthcare. Please take time to visit our site when you get a chance. We then went about working to develop our branding and our marketing. So we set out to create a regional brand that speaks to the unique benefits of locating to Mohave County, and create and produce a suite of professional economic development marketing materials geared around those targeted industries. Here are some examples of some headers and some brand storms for those targeted industries. And then here are some examples of some marketing maps. We've got major transportation networks, cost of living indexes, drive times, major industries, education, tourism and recreation, and industrial parks. We also, in that marketing, we created professional one-sheets of the targeted industries, and we did those for distribution, energy, and manufacturing. We also included testimonials from existing businesses within those industries, and we put on those things that businesses are going to want to know, like cost of doing business, incentives, comparative annual non-exempt labor costs, comparisons. And then we also went into inbound and outbound shipping costs comparisons for Mohave County versus various areas. I'd like to hit on a few various projects that we've been working on and have worked on. We helped assist in facilitating the Topak 66 Spa and Resort project. Once completed, there's 2 phases to this project. There's a total of a $14 million capital investment. The hotel will have about 120 rooms, and job creation is expected to be between 100 and 120 jobs. We also assisted the Stetson Winery project. This is the only winery and event center in northwestern Arizona. We completed in 2012 the Kingman Industrial Park Building Bridges to Business report. We surveyed over 20 companies, manufacturing companies within the Kingman Industrial Park. Interviews were conducted over a 6-month period between January 2012 and June 2012. A copy of this report can be obtained in our office. We also went through the process of rezoning some property that's county-owned adjacent to the library. This property is conducive to a commercial setting, and it was zoned recreational open space. And so we did go through that process, and the property was rezoned through the city of Kingman. We continue to assist in the BP wind project. The total project represents an investment of $600 to $800 million. Once completed, during the construction phase, there will be an estimated 350 workers. Once this project is completed, the construction phase is 300. Once it's completed, it'll be about 20 to 30 full-time jobs. Right now, the final environmental impact study has been completed, and BP is in the process of they're in negotiations with the utility provider for a power purchase agreement. Mohave County Economic Development Department is also working with the Bullhead Regional Economic Development Authority and Northern Vertex to reactivate the Moss Mine project. Currently, this project employs 30 people, and they operate 24 hours a day. I'm currently also working with a transportation distribution prospect. They're looking to expand in Mohave County. According to the prospect, there's a potential for upwards of 60 jobs. Their decision time frame is between 6 months to a year. We've got another project called Project June, which came in at the beginning of this month. It's a potential $100 million capital investment project, and right now we're on the short list for that, and we are competing against one other entity. We've also been working with Lake Havasu Partnership for Economic Development on a project that came on the radar in January of this year. Basically, as a team, we brought together some assets throughout the entire county that really showed this company, what we have to offer. And they're in the initial phases of testing their product, and we hope to land that project. And of course, with the completion of all the marketing tools, the cost comparison analysis, we're aggressively targeting not only California companies, but companies back east to look at Mohave County to relocate. In closing, I'd like to stress that what I think most citizens in Mohave County believe, that economic growth is vital to our area. Since the recession in 2008, the nation has really seen a substantial hit, and Mohave County, they weren't sheltered from that. Many people lost probably 50% of their net worth in different areas. Much of the Mohave County growth did come from housing at the time. I believe that we need to offset that and expand on that, so if that happens again, we're not as effective. So we need to really expand on our manufacturing base. The good news is that we are seeing signs of a recovery in the housing market, and with that, some of the industries that we do have here that target and provide for those entities are growing, and we are seeing employment. One example, American Woodmark, the last time I visited them, they were at 300 employees. I've heard that that number is up around 350. So there's 50 jobs right there that, just from our existing businesses that have expanded. I think that, it's going to be a long road ahead, and I think that, the communities that are seeing growth in today's competitive market, they'll have to be very creative in how they pursue new companies and how they look at the companies that they have and keeping them. So with that said, I'd like to again thank you for the time that you've allowed me to give the county a brief update, and I really look forward to working with each of you in your respective communities and throughout the entire county. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Any questions for our presenter?
I do. Thanks, Bennett. The website's great, and I understand that you're putting out information about the targeted industries, but once they're targeted, it seems like we're waiting for them to come to us. What are we doing to promote Mohave County out there? It seems like the time is right. We hear about all the regulations and taxations over in California. So is Mohave County taking any steps to market itself, be aggressive in recruiting businesses to come here?
Yeah, in our budget, we have approved, or in the process of being approved, we are using this material, the marketing material that I laid out to, we are in some site selection magazines, as well as, we look at certain size of businesses, and we'll do direct mailing to those businesses, and then we'll do follow-up calls to see if they, number one, got our information, and number two, is there anything else that we can help them with, or any questions that we can ask. Within the last 2 months, I've probably mailed 100 companies in the targeted industries that we think are a good fit for our area. So yeah, we are marketing to those companies.
I know that there are conventions, there are these big, huge conventions where companies go and counties go to promote themselves. Do we do anything like that?
In the past, we haven't. The previous directors and the director before him has never set that up. It could be something that, budget-wise, that we could put in the budget, and we could, go after a few different, conventions over the next year.
Okay. You also talked about our regional brand. What is our regional brand?
The regional brand is basically, you've got, with the water that we have, the manufacturing, the location to get into the Southern California markets. So it's a combination of distribution, transportation off of those roads to get into California, as well as the quality of life that we have with everything there is to do here: the mountains, the rivers, the lakes.
Okay. And one last thing. When you talk to companies, if they don't, what is their biggest problem with coming here? What are you hearing?
Well, in the past, workforce, we do have an aging population. Our average age is 42. So, with that, businesses are looking for a long period of time that they're going to be able to have a workforce. And so with that older age, manufacturing, is going to be hurt a little bit. But in regards to the healthcare services, we're going to see some, increases in that due to that age.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Ma.
Hi, Bennett. How does our property tax situation compare to California's? When it comes to competitiveness, how do we compare to them?
California has, Proposition, I believe it's 13, and so their taxes are set at a certain rate for an increase at a slower rate than maybe ours would increase. So, there are aspects to the property tax that we don't compete as well. So, I think that if you were to look at that, that would be something that could be an incentive that we could overcome. But we beat them in other areas. I mean, they're doing things to businesses that, are causing businesses to run away from them. So
if I can paraphrase your comments, because I was aware of that also, is that we're fine, we beat them when it comes to regulation, we're more favorable that way. I believe when it comes to some of our other income taxes and things of that nature, we're more favorable to them. But on property taxes, we're more or less on par with California right now.
correct. And then with other states, we're not as good.
You preempted my next comment, which is when we compete for businesses, we're not competing against California. If business is going to leave California, we're competing with our neighboring states of Utah, Nevada, Colorado, but we're not competing with California.
Correct.
So when it comes to our taxation and regulation benefits, if we just look at California, yeah, we win overall, but when it comes to looking at where those California businesses may go, we don't necessarily win overall, because some of those states are very aggressive, far so more than we are.
Correct.
Right.
And, some of the software that we have will enable us to be able to really put those numbers down and take a look at them. When a site selector is looking, they're going to look at all that when they go back to the company with the data.
And I have one more question. I saw one of the flyers that you threw on the computer here, and I know we've gone through this before, but I noticed when it showed some of the transportation hubs, the location of a BNSF railway station in Needles is not depicted. Why is that?
I think at the time when they put that together, they were looking at just put on there, the hubs that were within the county for the rail.
Right. Because I can tell you that from representing District 5, that people in the Mohave Valley area, and your map does indicate that there are business parks down there, would like it to be known that there is a rail station within 15 minutes of that area.
Yeah. And that's something that we can update those maps, if that's something that, I think needs to be done. And we can do that relatively easily within our office through just changing those
Okay.
maps. So.
We'll be talking very soon.
Okay.
Any further questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Our next item would normally be called to the public, but we have no one signed up for call to the public this morning. But that is an opportunity for the public to address their concerns to this body. And we do appreciate knowing what you've got on your mind and want to hear from you. So at our next meeting, maybe we'll have some participants. Our next item for the presentation is a presentation by the Bureau of Land Management on the Arizona Strip Travel Management Plan and the Unicrit Vegetation Treatment Project. And we have visitors from Utah. Lorraine, if you'll come forth.
Thank you very much for allowing us to come today. And just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lorraine Christian. I'm the field manager for the Arizona Strip Office of the Bureau of Land Management. And just for the record, too, the individual that was going to come and present for that Uinkaret Vegetation Project was not able to come, so we will not be giving a presentation on that at this time. We will at a future meeting. And then we'll be tag teaming our presentation, and so I'll turn it over for right now to Diana to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Lorraine.
I'm Diana Hawks, and I'm currently the team leader for Recreation, Wilderness, and Cultural Resources on the Arizona Strip Bureau of Land Management. Between 2001 and 2008, I was the planning team lead, and I came back down to this office many times. I worked with Pete Byers for many years. Mohave County was very involved. You were a cooperating agency on our planning effort when we revised our land use plan, and at that time we also did 2 new management plans for the national monuments that were created in 2000 by President Clinton. And so at that time, Grand Canyon Parish National Monument got its first resource management plan, but because it is Park Service and BLM managed, it's a cooperative unit. We also had at the same time a National Park Service general management plan, so they're both one document. And we completed that planning effort in 2008 and had the new planning documents at that time. When we first started doing planning, we did scoping meetings, and we found out that the highest issue, the issue of most concern by the public by far, was access. Not surprising. The public was very concerned. They wanted to make sure that they had access to use the public lands in the manners that they were accustomed to. And then on the other side, we had folks that were interested in preserving areas as well. And because of the proclamations for these national monuments, we're mandated as a federal agency to protect the monument objects on these lands. So on the Mohave County side, we have desert tortoise, an endangered species. We have some threatened plants that we also have to protect, as well as archaeological sites. So there's laws that mandate us to protect those. So when we realized we had a high concern for access, we knew that we had to have a process that we could look at all of the roads on the Arizona Strip, make sure that we had a current inventory, and we didn't at that time. So in 2002, we actually entered into a process that we inventoried all of the routes. We did them intensively. We did it by GPS, so we now have a GPS inventory that is accurate for the Arizona Strip. We thought when we started planning that it would be a fairly easy process and that we could quickly do this inventory and then evaluate the routes to see which ones we needed to close, which ones could be left open. And we found out that it was a very intensive, time-consuming, and costly process. So we weren't able at that time to finish the Arizona Strip field office. We were trying to work towards that, trying to finish that route evaluation and then eventually designation of these routes when we were doing land use planning, but because it was so involved and so time-consuming, we were only able to finish the national monuments at that time. The process that we used is now the same process that we're using to continue on the Arizona Strip field office, and that's the travel management plan that we're talking to you today about. That process involves not only that intensive route inventory, but we have a many-step process that's described fully in the land use plans for evaluating those, for involving the public, because the public is very concerned about it, and making changes if we need to. If we make a mistake, or we haven't considered a resource, or we haven't considered a use, we have a process in place that we can make changes on these routes too. If we're saying we're proposing this route closed, or we're proposing it open, or we're proposing it for administrative use only, our public review process, well, our internal process first, highlights any changes that we think might need to happen, and then the public process. During the public process that we did for the monuments, the people that gave us the best comments were the ones that knew the routes. So people like the livestock grazing permittees, because they're out there using the routes. Four-wheel drive users, people that are out there on the ground knew exactly what we were doing. And we brought with us a copy of the maps that we used. What we have, and I don't know if this will show, but we've got a map on the table here. Ah, yes, it does.
Showing.
Good job. What this map shows is you can actually see the areas highlighted in yellow are the sub-regions, and what the sub-regions are for a route evaluation. It's just simply an area divided that's big enough to fit on a map. So we divided the entire Arizona Strip into these sub-regions to evaluate the routes. And you can see the Arizona Strip is shown in gray. You can see the light gray blob kind of in the bottom left-hand corner. That is the Grand Canyon Parish National Monument, a 1 million-acre monument. Just north of that, you can see the yellow highlighted areas, and those are the Littlefield subregion on the west or on the left, the St. George Basin that's in the middle, and then on the right-hand side is the Colorado City subregion. Those are the areas that we are currently working on for our next environmental assessment and travel management plan. The dark gray areas that you can see are the areas that remain to be designated, and we'll handle those in a future environmental assessment travel management plan. And so our plan is, we're right now at the process where we're going to meetings like this, gone to the community meetings, the city council meetings, and given them a heads up that we're entering into this travel management planning effort. And that's what we're here today to do too, is just give you a heads up that we're entering into it and that we're going to be looking at these routes in detail. The maps that I have are blow-ups of these regions, and we'll leave them with you. As well, we have an information sheet that just has contact information, why we're doing what we're doing, and all this information, too, is on the website so the public can access it. So we will plan on having public meetings when we get ready for a draft environmental assessment, so the public can comment on it, because we do want the public to have an opportunity to look at it. And we're expecting changes, just like we had during the National Monument effort. Like I said, from people that know the routes. One good comment, for an example, one of the livestock grazing permittees came in and he said, wait a minute, look at your roads. You're proposing this road open, and I can't get my cattle truck down that road, and you're closing the only road that I can get my cattle truck down. And we said, oh, you're right, so we flipped it. We just opened the route that he could get his cattle truck down, closed the route that he couldn't get his cattle truck down, things like that. If we can make the changes, we will. If it doesn't impact a threatened and endangered species or something like that, then we'll make the change if we can. So I'm going to turn it back to Lorraine to get you into the weeds even further on what we're doing now.
Thank you. And Diana gave a really good description, so I'll try not to duplicate too much of it, other than to give you a little bit more detail on those 3 areas that she talked about that we're working on the assessment for right now. And we chose those as the first ones to start because they were around the communities. The Littlefield subregion is the one she was saying way over on the west side, and that's around Littlefield, Beaver Dam, of course, Mesquite, Nevada, and that gets a lot of use, of course. Then St. George Basin gets a lot of use from folks coming down to the Strip from St. George and those communities there. And then, of course, Colorado City, over around Colorado City, Hilldale area. And so what we did was, and we are taking this very, very slowly because we know it's probably a little bit slower than what we'd like in some ways, but it has provided us with some really, really good opportunities to involve the public. We had our scoping meetings back, it's been a little over 2 years ago now, and we had them in the little communities up in those areas. Got a lot of good public comments from folks about, things they wanted us to make sure we looked at. We also said if you know of roads that we don't have in our inventory, please let us know because we need that information. And so that was a little over 2 years ago. We've been working on trying to update our evaluations of each route. We're doing a lot of field verification. And then a little over a year ago, we said, and as Diana mentioned, the folks that are out on the ground the most are our cattle ranching permittees. And so we held a one-day meeting where we asked them to come in, all the ones with the affected allotments, and said, come in and tell us this is what we're proposing to do with all these individual routes. And we had them in by allotment, and we'd print out maps for them. And we actually, from that meeting, did make a lot of changes. And Diana gave a good example of one where, they said, well, I need this for whatever. And we weren't aware of that. And we said, that's very good. And so we incorporated that into what we are then proposing to do. And so now we're just trying to finalize our environmental review document. And then Diana also mentioned that we're doing these sorts of meetings in preparation for going public. And our plan at this point is to go public with the draft environmental document sometime this summer. We'll be holding additional public meetings in those communities around those areas at that time.
Beaver Dam meeting.
Oh, yes, thank you. One of the things, and this shows how I think how valuable these public meetings are, we held a meeting down in Beaver Dam, Arizona, back 2-3 months ago. And we were letting the folks, real similar to this, giving them an update about what our time schedule was, what we were looking at, what we wanted from them. And then when we mentioned that we were going to be having these public meetings this summer, they were very, very concerned. And for those tiny communities up there, we had about 80 people. And it was because it was travel management. And they were very, very concerned when we said we were going to be having the public meetings in the summer, and they kept saying, well, because a lot of those folks are seasonal residents, and they were getting ready to go home for the summer, and they wouldn't be back until the fall. And we were saying that, well, our plan was that we would have, for this particular area around the Littlefield area, that we would have it done by the fall. And they said, well, if you want our comments. You say you want our comments, but then you're not gonna hold things off until we're back and so we can give you public input. And Diana and I went down to that meeting. We were driving home that night. We said, you know what, they're right. And so we thought about it and wondered how we could, what we should and could do. And so at this point, what we're thinking about doing is pulling the Littlefield area out of this particular NEPA review document, and then wait until those folks get back in the fall. Because, you know, that's a very valid point. People say you want to hear our input, but then you don't want to hear our input. And so we said that's really important. We need to do that. And so that is one change that it shows on the map here, because we have been analyzing them all together, but we do think we're going to pull that one out for now and just give that a little more time so we can actually get those folks' input. So I think I've covered everything.
I have a question.
Thank you, Lorraine. Questions?
Yes.
Supervisor President?
So is it your position that all of this really does not have a real impact or effect on our grazing rights or our allotments for the ranchers up there?
One of the things, and what we do, and this is really getting into the weeds here, but we have 3 different types of designations per route. We have left open to the public. We have open for administrative uses, and that could be all different sorts of users. It could be for any type of permit holder, including ranchers, and then just flat out closed. And so that meeting that I was mentioning about how wanting to have the permittees come in, their access for whatever they would need would be, and I can't think of it, I mean, I suppose there could be a case where there might be a route that we're proposing to close that they really want, but the ones that have come in and talked to me, they're either going to have, it would either be on a route that's open to the public or open for them as being a permit holder.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is I had a call from one of the commissioners in Utah just the other day, and he said that the effects on some of the grazing rights and the allotments were so bad for some of the ranchers that the commissioners had to take action and actually use zoning methods to zone for grazing only because they were losing so much of their grazing land. So this was, are you aware of that?
No, I'm not.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Johnson?
You were mentioning endangered species. Do you have a list of the count of endangered species that you have on these parcels?
We do, but I don't have that with me. But yes, if you wanted it, we could certainly get it to you. Yes, it's in our land use plan too, but yes, we absolutely do.
When was the last census you did of your endangered species?
We actually get out there and do inventories all the time. For example, if we have any type of project, there's 2 types of on-the-ground inventories that we have to do. We have to do one for cultural resources, and then we do one for listed plants. Of course, the animals move around, but for plants, so we know where those are. And for the animals, we actually know the habitat. And we're doing, by species, we have ongoing inventories for different species.
Right. That would be nice if you get us a list of the species. I'm mostly interested in the tortoise populations and how they've gone up or down with your management up there.
Okay.
Also, you have, for this public input, we're able to submit things electronically, right?
Yes.
Then what's the big deal in Beaver Dam Littlefield? I mean, if they can submit electronically, you can still get your project done by fall.
We tried to convince them of that. We said, well, we could, and I'm thinking, I can't, maybe you can speak up, Diana, but I'm thinking that some of it might be they didn't, because we said, you know, give us your information, we can get it to you. And I know one of the things they said, and then I'll let Diana speak in, is they wanted to actually be there to be able to look at the maps. I don't know if they don't have the computer capability, I'm not quite sure, but.
Yeah, that's exactly what they said, because we passed around a list and got all of their names and addresses, and we said, well, we'll be able to send you the information wherever you are, because we'll have information on the web, you can submit comments electronically, you can email them to us. No, that wasn't good enough, and I think it was because primarily they're snowbirds, they're elderly folks. Some of them weren't computer literate or didn't have access, some of them did. It actually ended up being a really, really good meeting, because they came in thinking we were going to close roads. That's what brought them in the door. And then once they realized that, no, we're going to do public meetings, we're just giving you a heads up, then they got very concerned and they got involved. And that's exactly what we want. We want them there at the table, and I think they'll be there. So it would be a plus, I think, to hold off on that little field, to give them a chance to be there, because it's also going to enhance public involvement up there. That Virgin River Communities Board had kind of died, and that's the meeting we went to. And when they had so many people, they had 80 people come to their meeting, they signed them up as members of the Virgin River Communities. And so they were able to talk about other issues too. So I thought it was real good to get them in the door and then keep them involved in the public.
Right, I just know that the ones you've done in the past, not you specifically, but in Havasu, we did the trails program, and the Bullhead's done the area too, but the faster you move, it seems like the better it goes. I mean, if people are snowbirds and don't live here full-time, I mean, you still have a way for them to participate in it instead of dragging us out for a longer period of time.
That's exactly right. Now, the process that we're using, like I said, is the same one we used when we did the land use plans and the new monument plans, and it is very intensive. The BLM does not require offices to do an intensive inventory. Aerial photography is sufficient, so we've kind of gone above and beyond on that, and then the route evaluation process is one that we involve, like we do an adjacent agency review before it goes public, just to make sure that we're not surprised by anything, any route going out of state or to another agency's boundaries. We try to clean up as much as we can, and then the public input is very valuable. Because like I said, the folks that have the most information are the ones that are out on the ground. So,
Any further questions? Well, thank you so much for traveling down from St. George this morning, and thank you for your presentation. This is fine. Thank you, Diane. Anyone wishing to look at the maps or this information, I'll make available in my office later. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Following items listed under the consent agenda will be considered as a group and acted upon by one motion with no separate discussion of said items unless a board member as so requests. In that event, the item will be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion and action. Supervisor Johnston, do you have items?
No, sir.
Supervisor? No. Supervisor Brotherton?
Yes, I'm 15. We talk about that?
Item 16?
15,
15.
1-5.
Supervisor Moss?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to approve the consent minus item 15.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for all items. And I'll add item 11. So if you'll amend your motion possibly.
It's too late now. I'll make an amendment to my motion if Supervisor Moss will
I will.
agree to a second.
And we have an amended motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 11, I've got Dick Penwarden would like to speak to this issue.
I'll pass on that. If I can have a meeting with either Representative Watson or somebody on that, I'll pass on that.
Okay, thank you very much. And certainly after this meeting, that'd be fine. Thank you very much. Item 15.
Okay, I'm not sure what that building is, but is there a real need for it to be demolished? Justice Auxiliary Building demolition contract for, I don't know,
Mr. Chairman?
$59,000?
Administrator Hendricks?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Brotherton, this is a auxiliary building that's in terrible condition behind the Surbat Justice Court, and it's been evaluated that it doesn't have a need or a use. If you need more detail about the actual building, Steve Letowski's here and his people have done an evaluation, but it serves no purpose. It's dilapidated, and it's been slated on our capital improvement to go ahead and get rid of this building and demolish it.
Just seems like it cost us an awful lot to demolish these buildings.
Would you like to take a tour of the property before you make a motion?
No, I know which one he's talking about. I just wish there was another solution, but if there isn't, there isn't.
Okay. Is that in the form of a motion?
Yeah. I make a motion that item 15 be approved and the demolition be approved in the amount not to exceed $59,292.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. That puts us to the regular agenda, item number 26. Okay. We can talk about it under 28. Discussion
Excuse me,
possible-
Chairman Watson. Since item number 11 was pulled, we will have to take a vote.
Pardon me?
Since item number 11 was pulled from the consent agenda, we will have to take a separate vote on that item.
You are correct. Thank you for the correction. Chair would entertain a motion for item 11.
I move to approve item 11 of the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. And thank you for the correction. Item 26, discussion, possible action regarding the direct the emergency management coordinator to monitor the fire hazard conditions at the Mohave County Wallapai Mountain Park. When the fire hazard conditions on the Bureau of Land Management lands surrounding the park are determined by the BLM to be very high or higher, authorize the emergency management coordinator to direct the county staff to close access to the road to to Camp Levy and post signs prohibiting camping in that area. Actually, I brought this item mostly to the attention of the Development Services Director for the protection of people that were using the park area, to make sure that if we get in an extreme or very high conditions, that we have the authority to close that park. Mr. Hendricks?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we have had numerous meetings with the law enforcement and the emergency management people of Mohave County, and this is a proactive step that we are recommending the board take when the conditions get so extreme or very high, and we have a tremendous fire potential up on the hill, to have the board at this meeting direct that Camp Levy be closed to camping. What I do have, and what I'd like to do if the board would allow me to, is to have Byron Stewart, our emergency management coordinator, come down and explain a little bit about this process and what it actually means to do this.
Certainly.
Chairman Watson, Supervisor Moss, Brotherton, Angus, and Johnson. This is, as Administrator Hendricks said, this is a proactive step that we would like to take. We have, the primary issue up there is, of course, the road situation. There's only one road in and out of that to get to Camp Levy. And the road itself is not always in very good shape. It's maintained by the Communications Users Group for the BLM communication sites up on the mountain. And although it's passable, it's at slow speed, and it is susceptible, if a fire ignition occurs close to that road, for being cut entirely and preventing people from getting off of Camp Levy. We have no other means of getting those people off there. We've looked at this situation for the last several years, trying to determine if there was ways we could put in place an alternate evacuation route. It's just not viable. There's a hiking trail, flag mine trail, that's been there for several decades, but it's not an established trail. It's not recognized by the BLM as an established trail, and it would only be a last resort to get out, and it is difficult and dangerous to use. So that's not really an option. We've looked at establishing safe zones up there where there's some bare ground and some boulders, and not a lot of vegetation, where if campers were up there in that area, they might be able to take shelter there. However, they may be safe there from the fire, but not from the smoke and extreme heat. Same situation with regard to the LZ. There's an LZ up there on the just near Camp Levy that was developed a number of years ago. that you can get in with helicopters of the class of the DPS Ranger, but those helicopters only be able to take out a couple people. If there was a large group up there, you wouldn't be able to get people out in that manner. We actually had the Air Force come down and met with us last year and looked at that LZ for the potential of bringing in Blackhawks for an evacuation out of Nellis Air Force Base. And essentially, it's not a big enough area. You'd have to do substantial clearing to be able to do that. So it's the consensus of emergency management, and especially the Sheriff's Office search and rescue team leaders, the sergeants who run that we have an extremely dangerous situation there if we ever had to do a rapid evacuation as a result of a fire that started near the camp or that cut off access on the access road. Therefore, we feel that when the danger is very high or higher, as determined by the BLM and their experts up there in that area, that we should actually prohibit camping at that area in order to prevent that from happening. And what we'll do is we'll establish signs down at the bottom where the lock gate is that will say there's no camping and Camp Levy's closed. The Boy Scouts will actually take their lock off that they have on that gate so that that can't be used. And we'll also put in road closed signs up on the driveways that lead off of the main access road into Camp Levy. And we'd like to do that today because we've been in very high conditions for a number of weeks now. We actually talked to the Boy Scouts about 4 weeks ago and said, you know, we're probably going to recommend this to the board because it looks like we're going to get in that condition. And so we gave them a heads up so they wouldn't be scheduling people in toward the latter part of June. The main Boy Scout camp, in which there was about 175 people, was actually conducted last week, and they finished up on Saturday. So there should be nobody scheduled in there at this point.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman. Doesn't the chairman of the board have the authority in an emergency situation to shut these down? Isn't that true, Mr. Attorney? I mean, he can do it and then come back to us for approval if he needs it, but I mean, he has the authority if we have these fire dangers or anything else, he can go to the...
Chairman Watson, Supervisor Johnson, I believe that you would have the authority as the stewards of the land that we control, but I also believe that 2 or 3 years ago we passed an ordinance that clarified that authority. Perhaps Byron Johnson, or Byron Stewart is familiar with that.
I don't believe we passed an ordinance that allowed us to specifically close Camp Levy.
No, but we can close, the chairman has the authority to close anything, so I don't see why, you know, first of all, I was curious why we would have to direct you to monitor the fire hazard conditions. Is that part of your job anyway?
I do it all the time.
I just kind of thought you might be doing that, but but I mean, why are we giving the authority to you when we have to direct county staff when the chairman of the board should be contacted? Not that, you know, you can't do it yourself, but I mean, just to, not like he's going to say no. Why are we changing that, I guess?
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to take a stab at this. I think what Byron would tell you, Supervisor Johnson, is that the authority is not real clear that the chairman would have the authority to close the mountain down. However, there is the authority that the county attorney could do an emergency convene of the board and then have some type of action like what we're discussing today approved. What this will do is it will be an automatic. Once we reach a very high or higher fire, staff is then directed, without having to try to convene the board and to go through the extra, let's say, time and effort, staff is directed to go ahead and take steps to close the board. One of the reasons that we wanted to give that authority to our emergency management coordinator is he's got staff. We could have given it to, the board could give that to me. However, it would create a bureaucracy environment to where Byron's monitoring the conditions on the mountain. He gets the information, then he has to track me down. I direct him to close the mountain down, and then it's just a process, and it could fall through. So we're trying to make the process as simple as possible with giving the person that should have the direct information and contact and authority to perform the activities. And make it automatic to where when we reach these extreme or very high conditions, that mountain will be closed down. So to lessen the potential for a catastrophic event up there in Camp Levy.
Right, but you're saying that right now, at least the way I understood it, the chairman of the board, it's fuzzy if he has the authority to do that. If it's fuzzy if he has the authority to do that, how can we as a board give the authority to Mr. Stewart? I'm saying that the chairman is in charge of emergency disasters. He is the head honcho. He should have the authority to do that. It shouldn't sit with somebody below him. I mean, and if he's not there, the vice chairman's called and makes those calls. I mean, we're giving away our authority, and it makes it so we're not even in the loop anymore. That's all I'm saying. I have no problem with Byron, shutting down a road. He'll shut it down anyway and then just ask for permission later, but I think there's a pecking order that needs to be followed. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, Mayor?
Supervisor Moss?
For how long has Camp Levy this year been in a very high or higher fire condition?
It's been at least a couple of weeks. It's been in that condition. Actually, it was starting to approach that about 3 to 4 weeks ago when we initially approached the Boy Scouts and told them that conditions were getting severe. And it varies from year to year, as I'm sure you're aware, depending on the weather conditions and what kind of spring rain, what precipitation we get. Sometimes we could go almost until monsoon season in July before we get into very high conditions. Other times we'll get into that before Memorial Day.
Right. So if we had passed this item 2 months ago, the Boy Scouts would not have used Camp Levy this year because we would have cut the road.
I would say maybe 2 weeks ago. We probably would have shut it down a couple of weeks ago.
And they do it the first or second week of June.
Their main camp is usually the first or second week in June. We've been having conversations with them to see if there was some flexibility in when they could schedule that. Obviously, they're waiting till kids get out of school, so they don't have a lot of flexibility. But the earlier they can have it, the less chance that they'll be at risk.
Right. But this year, the big camp would not have occurred if we passed this.
Probably not.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and Supervisor Moss brought up something. Why wasn't the chairman gotten a hold of if there's that big of a danger that your department would have closed it down 2 weeks ago? If you had the authority, why didn't rise to the level that you would get a hold of Chairman Watson to say, hey, I need this thing closed down for the safety of our Boy Scouts?
We had that discussion, but we decided that it would be best to bring it to the board since we've never actually done this before. We've never actually closed Levy, and we felt like it would have to come to the board anyway for ratification. We monitored the situation on a day-to-day basis. And we work very closely with the main Boy Scout camp. Actually, the directors of that camp we've worked with for a number of years now, and they're very, very safety conscious. We weren't concerned too much that they would start a fire because they monitor that very closely. They have a fire watch posted 24/7. We've set up communications with them that we installed with a direct phone line up there and a radio system. Also, we monitored the weather to be sure that there wasn't going to be any storms coming in with dry lightning. If we'd seen that was going to happen, that we were going to have some dry lightning, that's exactly what would have happened. I would have gone to Chairman Watson and recommended that we shut it down immediately.
I just want to make sure that we understand that whether it's a flood or anything, it's an emergency. If you decide it's an emergency, then you get a hold of our chairman and he makes the decision and goes ahead. I mean, it doesn't make a difference if it's Camp Levy Road or the road going to somebody else's house. I don't care.
And that's our, Supervisor Johnson, that's our procedures. Our procedures is any emergency that occurs, I will go through my superiors, Nick Hunt, and then from Nick to Administrator Hendricks, and then from Administrator Hendricks to Chairman Watson. Any type of emergency situation that we see that arises where we have that critical situation needs to be handled urgently, we will do that.
Thank you.
And actually, to answer a couple of your questions, Executive Administrator Hendrickson and my brother and I went to tour the facility up there about 2 weeks ago, and we found the conditions to be extremely dry and dangerous at that point, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring it to the board today. Certainly don't want to subjugate the authority of the chairman in any way, shape, or form, but I did feel it was very important that if we had to act extremely quickly, on making a decision at Camp Levy, we could do so, and that's why I was suggesting that we give this authority to Mr. Stewart to close down the Camp Levy. It's an unusual situation in which there's only one access, and it's a situation up there where it's extremely dry from essentially the first part of June through the time that we receive the monsoon. So we just wanted to make absolutely sure that it was closed under those situations and not have to go through a lengthy process.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask another question?
Certainly.
I'm reading the backup material. The BLM has not said it's a no-fire zone as of yet. Is that correct?
The BLM has, actually, I discussed this with the BLM Kingman District Office last week and also with the State Forestry Division. And State Forestry Division indicated to me that they were going into Stage 2 restrictions yesterday. Now, I haven't been able to confirm that they have done that, but that's what they told me last Wednesday. Also, the BLM office told me that they were going into Stage 2 restrictions this Friday, June 21st. Stage 2 is no open fires at all except those fueled by propane.
The point I'm trying to get is there's actually a very high rating, then there's an extreme rating, and then above and beyond that is no fires, the Stage 2 restrictions that you're...
Well, actually, Stage 2 may kick in during extreme conditions. It could even kick in during very high, but most likely in extreme conditions, and it's based on a number of factors, the fuel moisture, the precipitation, and a lot of it is based also on the anticipated drying conditions from the wind and the high temperatures.
Well, in order to, I mean, it doesn't, tell me where this is incorrect, but if we want the Boy Scouts to use Camp Levy, and I understand that's one of the reasons it's there, and they're not out of school until June, and the BLM was not willing to say at the time they were using it that it was a fire hazard, and in that Stage 2 restrictions are kicking into play. Why don't we say, yeah, we'll shut the road down, but only when BLM says it's now a Stage 2 restriction?
I think that would be too late. And to be quite honest, I hate to criticize a fellow agency, but I think the Stage 2 restrictions they're going into this Friday were too late. They should have gone into those before now. And I think as our jurisdiction, we need to, although we rely on the BLM and they have a great deal of expertise in their people that monitor the fuel moisture and the fuel load up there and the fire danger conditions, I think we need to retain the ability to act on our own instead of just following them, because they have, in the past, they're a bureaucracy, and sometimes it takes them, when they make a decision, it takes them a couple weeks to actually implement it. And I think that leaves us in a situation where we are maybe not being as proactive as we should be in addressing the situation in our jurisdiction. We did that last year, as a matter of fact, typically on Camp on Wallapai Mountain Park. We go into restrictions the same day that the BLM does. On their Stage 2 restrictions, or even on Stage 1 restrictions, which is limited campfires. But last year we actually implemented those in the Wallapai Mountain Park a couple weeks before the BLM did in theirs, because we were seeing extremely windy conditions up there, red flag conditions, and we had limited staff in the park to be able to monitor the fires that were going on in the park, the campfires. And so we felt like we needed to go ahead in advance of the BLM and implement those measures.
Why was the rating of very high chosen as opposed to, let's say, extreme, or what's the other ranking right below very high? What was
High is below very high.
Right. So what was the reason to say we're going to cut the road when it's very high as opposed to high or extreme?
Well, I think very high, and this was some discussion I had a lot of input from the Sheriff's Office, search and rescue people, and also from the BLM and our fire chiefs. A lot of this discussion we've had with the fire chiefs. And essentially very high is you have a high risk, and a lot of that is subjective in terms that bumps back and forth between very high, extreme, depending on whether the wind's blowing or not, and the temperatures. So we felt like extreme was waiting way too long. We felt like very high was a condition that where we needed to actually take action, and primarily because of the limited access road. If we had other means of evacuation, we had other evacuation routes, we might have elected to say, well, let's just do it when it's extreme. But when it's a very high risk and we only have one evacuation route in and out, it's an extremely dangerous situation for evacuations.
Question?
Besides the Boy Scouts, is this a heavily used area? I'm not getting that.
Camp Levy, if you're familiar, was essentially back in the 50s, the board allowed the Boy Scouts to go in and use that area for youth groups. So the Boy Scouts can allow any youth groups up there that they would like to have in there. Most of them are Boy Scout troops, and they come in on different weekends other than when the main camp occurs. A lot of times we'll see a group almost every weekend through June, sometimes during the week. The groups aren't near as big as the main camp, but a lot of times there are 2 or 3 dozen people up there, sometimes more, that would be camped at Camp Levy. And so it is used fairly frequently.
Is there any other place where they can go? I mean, is it?
Well, they
mean that
can,
won't be-
for instance, one of the groups that was scheduled to go up there, I believe the last week in June, when we give them a heads up that very likely we would be closing it, I think they reschedule into Wallapai Mountain Park, into one of the areas there.
Any further discussion for?
Mr. Chairman, I guess the only thing I have is everybody else in the county, if we have a fire hazard, they have to go to Byron, who goes to Nikon, who goes to the county administrator, who goes to you, except for this one road. We're making a whole thing for one road. I think that's the chairman's job, and that's where our emergency management works, because now we've got a book that says everybody is contacted. Here's our list on how you contact people, except Camp Levy. Go to page 24 to see exactly what you do there. I think the system works the way it is.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. Any further comment or questions? Is there possibility of a motion on this item?
I would consider voting for this if it was limited to extreme conditions. My concern is, or my thought is, that this situation that we have up there has been going on for many, many years, and I can't think of a more reliable group to go up there than the Boy Scouts and use this park, which is one of its intended purposes. And I do not want there to be a situation where they're denied using this park because it's very high, when they've never ever caused a problem when it was very high. Ideally, I'd prefer the BLM to say it's a no-fire situation. So why are we making that decision for them? So I don't like the idea of this, because the practical consequence of voting yes is that this park is going to be cut off for use by the Boy Scouts. That's my opinion, considering the month of June. That will be the practical consequence.
I have a question.
Certainly.
As of right now, isn't it closed? It's closed now,
No.
right?
No, it's not
It's
closed.
not closed yet?
As of today, it is not closed.
Okay.
I believe you presented a motion, is that correct?
Well, I'll make a motion. It'll be even more severe than I suggested before. I move that we direct the Emergency Management Coordinator to monitor the fire hazard conditions in Mohave County Wallapai Mountain Park, and when the fire hazard conditions on the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, land surrounding the park are determined by the BLM to be at Stage 2. Is that the phrase that you used earlier?
That's correct.
Stage 2 or higher. Authorize the Emergency Management Coordinator to direct county staff to close access road to Camp Levy and post signs prohibiting camping.
We have a motion. It appears that your motion is lacking a second,
It does.
so this item will have failed for passage. Item number 27. Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Yes, sir.
Discussion and possible action, approve the county administrator's job description. Could we have our Human Resources Director, Ray Asuna, address this issue?
I guess I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Is there any additions or corrections from the board members on what they discussed last time?
On item 27 on the job description?
Right.
Actually, Mr. Moss, or Supervisor Moss could answer that question.
I reviewed what the county staff had put together. It looks like it mirrors what I had provided without the dashed lines and whatnot. And I provided no further input after that.
Yes, well then, unless Mr. Osuna is going to tell us something new, do we have a motion for?
Okay, entertain a motion.
Hildy, you're looking at me like I grew a second head.
The author will do it.
Oh, yeah, we have someone who wants to speak to it.
Okay. Mr. Robinson, I'm sorry, Mr. Asuna, to bring you up. Mr. Robinson, you care to speak to this item?
I'm Stephen Robinson, 3439 North Bowie Road, Golden Valley, Arizona. Chairman Watson, Supervisors, Moss, Brotherton, Angus, and Johnson, I am in support of addressing this and having a limitation on the powers. Due to the history of the abuse of the power, there was platforms by several of the candidates addressing this various issue, and thankfully they addressed it in February by eliminating the county manager ordinance. However, the current county administrator has as much power, if not more, because he's wearing several other hats. He is currently the county engineer, the floodplain manager, and thus, because of that, he controls a big chunk of the budget. The county engineer, like the clerk of the board, is a statutory officer, and I believe that having that much power in one person can lead to still the potential abuse of power. Mr. Hendricks is a nice guy, as nice as you'll ever meet, but still the potential for abuse of power is there. He controls every road, every subdivision he has to sign off on. And so my suggestion is that since there is a county engineer statutory position, that someone be appointed that answers directly to the board instead of having all that power over the flood control department, because he is the floodplain manager, am I correct? And the county engineer. I think there should be other people, specifically not the county administrator, that has that much power and would be able to answer independently to the board. There was a position in the new budget to have a new county engineer position within the flood control budget at $126,000. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good salary to have for a new engineer, but my point is there should be somebody that answers directly to the board about the roads. Because that is a statutory position. So that's my suggestion, is that you say that you put into this ordinance something that would say the county administrator will not wear other hats, so that we have a division of authority and a diversity of opinion. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
I have a comment. Okay.
Supervisor Brotherton?
Actually, this recommendation actually came from the administrator. He felt like that this should probably be, go through the board rather than just, so I think you're the one that agreed to this, proposed this.
Supervisor, I'm sorry. Mr. Hendrick.
And I'm not sure, Supervisor Moss did an excellent job putting together, I think, the thoughts of the board regarding my job description, and I support it. The only thing that I wanted to make sure, I did send out an email to the board to try to clarify when, or to try to modify when disciplinary action would come in front of the board. And what I was suggesting in my email is that obviously the board would have to concur with any hiring or termination of unclassified employees, but I requested that the only requirement of the county administrator would be that if there were disciplinary action taken against unclassified employees, that that be made to the Board of Supervisors individually and not collectively at a board meeting, so that the board wouldn't be compelled to take action on concurring or approving that disciplinary action in open session. The reason I made that suggestion is I believe that disciplinary action could be various stages that wouldn't constitute a rise to the level of termination, and that should be handled administratively and not collectively by the board in the public.
I agree.
Then did you want to make a motion then to change item number 27 from
Yes,
from
I'll
the
make a
current
motion
to the
that we,
recommended by supervision is exercised directly or through subordinate executives over a staff or managerial, professional, protective services, inspector, labor or trades, and clerical, technical, professional, through disciplinary action of unclassified staff requires notification of the board of supervisors, and their hiring or termination requiring concurrence with the board of supervisors. Is that the intent of your motion?
yes, that's the intent of my motion.
Okay.
I'll
I'll-
second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
When I put discipline into that phrase, the reason for doing that was it is, well, one, I view classified staff based upon prior action of this board as being people who we have far more direct control over than we do have with employees who are in the merit system. When it comes to the reason for the concurrence of the board in disciplining is when it comes to that level of employee, I wanted to know, one, what they did, why they did it, if they did do it, and if they objected to the accusation or they thought the discipline was overly harsh, I wanted the board to have the ability to intervene if necessary. It also occurred to me, being a cynic on occasion, that if I were a person who wanted to get rid of a employee who's not protected by the merit rules, but knowing I needed the concurrence of the Board of Supervisors, I would begin to paper that person's file, is how lawyers sometimes refer to it. So when I go to the Board of Supervisors, I would show them a list of a half dozen to a dozen transactions which require or which support my current decision to terminate an employee. That's a hypothetical. I don't think Mr. Hendricks would ever do that. I believe, though, we write rules for purposes of dealing with both the good and the bad in people. And because of that, I liked the idea of having the discipline also being subject to approval by the Board of Supervisors, because that would tell the employee and it would tell the public that we agreed with the county administrator's decision and the discipline that was assessed against the employee. So there could be no argument. Mr. Administrator Jones, so I'm not picking on Mike here, has disciplined Director so-and-so for the last 12 months, and now when he's going to the board, he's going to rely on all that past discipline, which may or may not be of good quality and good decision-making or justice, and to support his current decision to terminate that employee. That was my reasoning for having that phrase in there.
Any further discussion?
I guess, Mr. Chairman, if I may, the reason I disagree with that theory is if the administrator gives a week off or a day off or finds somebody a small amount, then we drag them through an open public hearing on something that, maybe the guy's driving too fast or doing whatever, and it's a small technicality, and we know everybody goes through personalities, death in the family, divorce or something, they take them different, and sometimes you have to get them back online. I don't know that I mean, these are all highly paid professionals and very well thought of in their profession. I hate to see them drug through anything less than a firing. That would just be mine, Supervisor Moss.
And, Mr. Chairman, I do agree with Mr. Johnson's statement. That would be a consequence of the way the ordinance is current, or excuse me, the ordinance, the job description is currently written. It's more of which poison do you want to take, would be my viewpoint. And I'm always of the viewpoint that we take the poison which is more transparent and more obvious and tells everyone in this room and everyone watching on TV exactly what's going on. That's why I put that phrase in there.
Thank you, Supervisor Moss. Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, we have a motion and a second off the floor. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed?
Opposed? Nay.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Item carried.
You don't need Mr.
No. Now we'll move to item number 28, discussion, possible action regarding the Diamond Bar Road and other alternative access to the Grand Canyon Skywalk and related issues concerning county transportation administration as it impacts and is impacted by the Wallapai tribe. Supervisor Moss brought this item to our attention.
Yeah, I put it on the agenda primarily because at their last meeting, various individuals for the tribe had made presentations, and business people had made presentations during the call to the public, and we as the Board of Supervisors sitting here essentially said nothing because we're not allowed to. We couldn't engage them in conversation. We couldn't have a give or take there. And I wanted this board to have the opportunity, if there was anyone with the tribe, to have that discussion so they would know that we weren't trying to ignore them. We were trying to remain in legal compliance. We do understand the need to resolve that issue that was up there. It looks like resolution is on path. And I'd like to apologize for the Wallapai tribe for us not being able to engage with them in discussion at a fully open board meeting. We can blame the Arizona legislature for that. And other than that, I have nothing else to add because it looks like everything else has been taken care of or is in process of being taken care of.
Thank you, Supervisor Moss. We do have two people signed up that would like to talk to this issue. Mr. Dick Penwarden?
Try to make this short, and I'm new in the area, so if I'm a little bit out of line, you'll have to try to excuse me. And the only thing I saw on this is a lot of things that I've read in the paper, and it seems that I would be very cautious if I was in the position of the board here for the county, is that it seems like the tribe has not lived up to other things in the past with some of the people that they've dealt with some of the contracts they've had. And I would just caution the board that if they have to enter into, that they really look into this past, that they don't get something where they're going to get their feet stepped on. And that's the only thing I see in looking at for the benefit of the county is that be sure that anything agreement that you go into, that it's going to be lived up to. And that's basically my only statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penwarden. Bobby Dewey?
My concern on this is we have maintained that road, Mohave County, for the last 4 or 5 years, right? At
more than that.
Estimated cost of $250,000 per year, and the Indians do not put none of that bill. Yeah, if I'm right. I make a strong suggestion. We have hundreds of people that pay lots of taxes that we do not maintain their road. But here we are up there maintaining those Indians' roads who have plenty of money if they use it right. So I'm asking that we do not finance the Indians anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dewey. I believe that's the end of item 28, as there requires no action.
Correct. Thank you.
Item number 29, discussion, possible action regarding the approval of the board to oppose further closure by the BLM of grazing lands in and around the Arizona Strip. Further authorize Chairman Watson to sign the attached letter to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Buster Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to approve if everybody's had a chance to read and agrees.
I'll second.
We have
Hildy
a-
seconded.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
I would like to say, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Johnson is very much on the right track on this issue.
Thank you. There being no further discussion, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 30, discussion, possible action, authorized under the provisions of Mohave County Ordinance Number 2013-04, the implementation of the outdoor fire and permissible consumer fireworks prohibition in county fire zones 2, 3, and 4, which include above sea level elevations from 2,001 to 8,000 feet, effective 12 p.m., June 17, 2013. This prohibition would include the unincorporated county areas outside of state, federal, and tribal lands. Discussion or question?
I move that we approve item 30 of the agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Did you have problems as a child with fire or something? You've seen
Well,
put a
I'll tell
lot of things on the agenda.
You'll have to get in my file for
Oh,
that. There being no further discussion, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. And item number 31, discussion, possible action regarding the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2013-081, supporting the full and present implementation of the transfer of public lands. I believe everyone received a copy of that resolution.
Motion to approve.
We have a
Second.
motion
Second.
and a second for approval. Discussion? There being no further discussion, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carried. Thank you so much. Meeting adjourned.
Sorry, I fell down on my
You did fine. You did fine.
papers.